everybody, DeathsStalker here. So here we are, the beginning of July, and it is now summer vacation time for MotoGP. So for the next 3 weeks there are no races. So I thought to help fight my MotoGP addiction, I'd do a little video on what's happened so far. Now, unless you lived under a rock as far as racing goes, Marquez is leading the championship by a significant amount. So I thought I'd just sort of give you my opinion on what's going on with the various teams and riders and see how we got there. So I'm going to start off with Aprilia. Now Aprilia is the, what I would say is like the poorest team. They have it's the smallest factory. They have the least amount of riders, and they spend, you know, a lot of money for their size, but you know, racing MotoGP is big bucks. And Aprilia right now is, you know, languishing down. I'm in the 13th to 14th or 15th place in the championship. I'll put a picture here with the current standings of MotoGP. And just get those bumps here. The team consists of Andrea Ioni, who used to race for the Ducati, and then they let him go and he went to race for Suzuki, and he then got picked up by Aprilia. And he's been really hot, cold, and mediocre in his riding. I don't know what exactly is going on. Like, sometimes there's a lot going on away from racing that is the reason why someone's results are really bad, but he's had a pretty bad year, and I don't think he endeared himself to the team too much. At the start of testing season, he wasn't able to attend a test because apparently he had some cosmetic surgery and he wasn't allowed to wear a helmet. And it's not like the tests are decided at the last minute. These things are scheduled months in advance, so it's like, okay, you sort of question his dedication. And like, there's no question that the Aprilia motorcycle is down on horsepower. It's a, you know, it's pretty easy to come into MotoGP and get to a certain point, you know, where you can be in the top 20. But to try to get to the top 10, it takes a lot of work, and to try to get to the top 5 is even more, and to try to get to and stay in the top 5, the top couple, is monumentous. And I don't think Aprilia is there, and I don't know if they're ever going to get there at the rate they're going, but you never know, they might have a breakthrough. Now the other Aprilia rider is I believe it's Espargaro, one of the Espargaro brothers, and he is riding pretty good, but the fact the bike is so slow, he's trying to make up for, you know, what's you know, the lack of horsepower by, you know, braking harder, accelerating sooner, and unfortunately that's resulted in some crashes and whatnot. So he ends up with a lot of DNFs. Now the next people in line are KTM. Now KTM is a little bit bigger factory, and they're definitely spending a lot more. They actually have a satellite team now, and they have Pol Espargaro, who's Elias's brother, who is actually doing pretty good. He sort of would be like the Marc Marquez of the secondary classes of bikes. Like, he is definitely, I believe right now he's like in the 10th in the championship or 11th. I can't remember the exact number, but he's quite up there. But again, a lot of what's happening with him is he's riding the bike way over the limit to get there, and unfortunately, you know, with that happening, he is falling off. Now the surprising part is his teammate is Johan Zarco, the Frenchman, who was, you know, absolutely spectacular on the Yamahas, actually finishing ahead of them on many occasions in his rookie season, and he has been falling off more than Marc Marquez has ever done. He's having a real problem trying to connect to the bike and try to get feedback, and it's just not there. Now Tech 3 Yamaha moved over to KTM as a satellite team, and they are now with Happy Siren, and I can't think of the name of the other rider, and they are almost at the very bottom of the list of people scoring points. They're just not coming to grips with the KTM at all, and KTM has been trying to make their bike more provide more feedback to riders, but it doesn't seem to me like it's actually happening. So I know Zarco is getting very, very depressed, and you know, and it's showing in his riding. But this has been going on since last year. So sometimes, again, there's something going on outside of racing that no one's talking about. You know, it could be a situation with a family member, or you know, I know there's riders who've had problems with their managers, and that's caused them to ride badly. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on. Now the next people, it was sort of a toss-up here. And a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I would have had it the other way around, but this time I'm going to put Suzuki in there as the next team. And Suzuki probably has the best handling motorcycle on the track. And their bike actually is very good at managing its tires, so it's not eating the tires up. But the one thing it's lacking is horsepower. And again, what's happening with Alex Rin, who's riding the bike, is again riding harder, faster, braking later, and he unfortunately has had some bad crashes. He's also had issues with bad qualifying. Now he's had a couple races like Assen and in Germany where he actually had pretty good qualifying, but he managed to fall off in the races. So he's not having a good summer break. But I think Suzuki's just got to produce an engine that actually can get some power down. It doesn't show up so much on the tight tracks, but you get to the large tracks, like the ones with the long straightaways, and you watch the Suzuki just, you know, it's like the guy forgot to shift to the next gear. That's how much slower they are than Honda and Ducati. Now we're switching up because again, I would have put Yamaha prior to Sunday's race in the position where Suzuki was, but Yamaha seems to have found a little bit. Maverick Vinales is actually, he's a lot happier. He actually won at Assen, and he finished second to Marc Marquez at the Sachsenring. Now that was a very, very, very distant second. Like, we're talking like, I think if Mark hadn't slowed down, it would have been like 10 or 12 seconds behind, which for MotoGP is ridiculous. But what you're seeing is, I think Yamaha has found something. Their bikes are still slow. Again, you actually see it on, again, like the longer tracks where they can't keep up. And I think what's happened is Yamaha brought somebody in from World Superbike, who's electronics guru, late last year to help out, because apparently Yamaha's electronics was crap. And I think they're finally starting to get some results. So the bike's actually able to put some traction down as they're coming out of corners. But again, I think the situation you have with Yamaha is the bike actually is definitely slower. Now supposedly Yamaha is going to be demonstrating the new 2020 engine, I think in the next couple weeks, for the riders to test, to give them some feedback, which definitely shows you that Yamaha knows this is serious and they have to step up. Valentino Rossi and Maverick Vinales have had a very bad season. Maverick has been taken out, I believe it was like 3 or 4 times so far this season by other riders, so it wasn't his fault, but it really sucks when it happens to you. Valentino has been taken out. He got taken out in the 4-rider wreck that was caused by Jorge Lorenzo. And he also had a crash at Assen where he actually took out Tadahika Harara from the LCR team, and actually that rider was injured. I'll talk about that later. And they've had a very bad season. Like actually the last 5 races, Valentino's only finished 1. So it's been a horrible season for him. There's a few times where the bike seems to work, and then the next day it's not working, and that seems to be the big problem with Yamahas. Like as the temperature changes, the weather changes, it really seems to affect the bike, and much more than everyone else. So Yamaha's still not there. Maybe for next year they might be able to do something about it, but I think they're pretty much they're so far down on the points for the championship right now, it's pretty much written off for them. But things can happen. Now the next is Ducati. Now everyone knows Ducati has the fastest motorcycles, and they still do, but not by much. The Hondas now are almost as fast. Ducati is actually only faster on the top end, which is not a good thing. Ducatis are having problems turning, and again they're having problems in certain types of tracks, and it's actually starting to show. Andrea Dovizioso, he's not been having a good season. Like last year he was consistently in the top 3, you know, in there, not necessarily fighting for the win every race, but he was fighting for the podium. And the last 3 or 4 races, he has only lucked into finishing 4th because so many riders in front of him crashed. The actual standings would be actually worse if it wasn't for these other riders falling off in front of him. His teammate Danilo Pellicci, I'm messing all the Italian names up. Anyways, he actually got his first win ever in MotoGP, and it happened at Misano, which is his home track, absolutely spectacular. And he actually finished on the podium the next race, and he's actually finishing slightly better than Dovi, which is, you know, not helping the championship, but it's good for the team having 2 strong riders. And unfortunately, they both have been falling off a lot lately. The Ducatis, you know, they're trying to ride as hard as they can, and it's just not working very well. So it's not looking too good for them. Now they also have a couple satellite teams, one with Jack Miller, and Jack has been, you know, he's riding the 2019 Ducati just like the factory team, and he has shown signs of being able to fight for the lead and fight for the podium. Unfortunately, Jack hasn't quite managed to learn how to manage tires properly, so he'll be very good and strong at the start, and then, you know, 10-12 laps into the race he starts to fade as the tires start to go off. And he's also had a few crashes as well, you know, being caught up by, you know, trying to override where the bike isn't quite performing. And the other Ducati riders, Tito Rabat and I can't think of the other rider's name, they also have had the same problem. They're just not quite competitive, so they're actually pretty much all over the place in the standings. Now we're going to come to Honda. Now Honda really in a bad way at the start of the season, because they ended the season with the majority of the riders hurt. Jorge Lorenzo was hurt when he was riding for Ducati, and he came out to test ride the new Honda as they're trying to get it adjusted for him, and he managed to fall off. He didn't hurt himself that particular time, but he managed to hurt himself again, and then in a motocross training accident I believe it was in January or February, he managed to hurt himself, break a bone, and he's fallen off a lot. I know Honda's made a lot of changes to the bike to try to make it more rideable for his style, and there was some improvements. Unfortunately, what happened at one of the races, he was actually right up there with Mark and Dovi and Rossi and whatnot, and you get this thing, it's multi-bike draft. It actually gives you a better draft than what you normally would get, and he got sucked into a corner a lot hotter than he had would be. Then he got on the brakes and wasn't quite able to stop and crashed out, took out Dovey, took out Vinales, took out Rossi, and of course himself. And then at Assen on Friday practice, he came off at a high-speed corner, and it was a horrible looking crash. He had tucked himself in so he wouldn't be flailing around when he hit, but he was doing some ragdoll stuff, and he actually managed to crack 2 vertebrae in his neck. And he is out until hopefully the first race, which is Brno into Czech Republic. Now, Cal Crutchlow, of course, had a broken ankle from Australia from last year, so he actually never got to test the new Honda. And he wasn't actually able to really ride the bike until just before the season started. Mark had to be careful for the first couple rides because he had to go for surgery for that shoulder of his that kept separating. And when the doctors got in there and started working on him, they found it was actually a lot worse than they thought it was. And of course, you know, he had a long recovery. His recovery was a lot longer. And all this sort of ended up with Honda not really getting all the necessary feedback for their bikes. Now, there's no question their bike is faster and it is better, but Mark has been saying that it's better in some areas and not as good in others. So in other words, they've gotten some improvements, but they lost some of the stuff. So he's had to change his riding style with the new bike, and he's now setting the record for the furthest lean over on a bike. And it used to be I think it was 62 degrees. It's now 66 or 67. I'll post it here when I show a picture of him actually leaning over. And it's just incredible that he can lean this bike over and ride it. Now, Cal Crutchlow's teammate, he actually got hurt pretty bad by a crash with Rossi, and got his ankle fractured, and he had ligament damage, and he actually came out and raced the final race of before the summer break and finished in the points. And it's just amazing that this guy was in so much pain that the medical people from the MotoGP Medical Center were actually checking him out after every session to make sure he wasn't in too much pain, because it was he was in a lot of pain. Like at the end of the race, they had a picture of him sitting in the pit in his box with his leg up wrapped in ice. That's how much pain the guy was in after, you know, racing a 30-lap race. Now, Mark himself, as far as the season goes, he's actually been pretty consistent. Finished second the first race. Second race in Argentina, he just basically, you know, made everybody look silly. He was so far ahead. Austin, Texas, he looked like he was going to ride away for the win, and he had made a slight mistake coming in the one corner and crashed out of the lead, and that gave Alex Rins his first win ever, MotoGP win, on a Suzuki. Now the problem with it was Honda was also having a few technical problems. They had issues with the chain actually coming off the sprocket. It happened to Jorge Lorenzo a couple times. It happened to Mark in practice. Then it happened to Jorge in the middle at the end of the one straightaway of Austin. And when Honda actually shipped the bikes back to Japan to figure out what was going on, and I guess they were able to recreate what the problem was, and they fixed it, which is good to hear. So it's been quite an interesting season. Now, Mark right now has I believe a 66-point lead in the championship, basically 2.5 races. So it's looking pretty much like if things keep going like this, he's going to get his 5th MotoGP World Championship. But again, there's 9 more races left, and they're going to be on to some races that Ducati's pretty strong on. And you know, nothing's ever guaranteed in racing, but right now it's not looking good. So if the other teams work really hard, they might make more of a race out of it. But Mark's also been racing pretty smart, where he's if he can't get the win, he'll settle for second or third or fourth. He's realized that it's the long game that actually wins the championship. So anyways, that's my little blurb about MotoGP. Hopefully in another 3 weeks we'll actually be back at it in the Czech Republic. DeathsStalker signing off.